Life on the frontier is a cruel teacher, where each sunrise brings the promise of hope and every sunset the weight of loss. In the dust-swept expanse of the American West, Bill was a man caught in the grip of grief, struggling to navigate a trail littered with heartache. A cattle drover by trade, he had lost more than his herd. He had lost the very spirit that once drove him into the untamed wilds. Now, at a makeshift camp under a sky painted with the last glow of twilight, Bill stood at a crossroads, his future as uncertain as the shadows that danced around him. By his side was Roger, a German shepherd whose loyalty burned brighter than the flickering campfire. Together, they had weathered storms and faced the harshest trials, but tonight the air hummed with something more, a whisper of fate lurking just beyond the horizon. As Bill rummaged through the abandoned storage locker he had stumbled upon, his fingers brushed against a rusted lockbox, its surface cold and uninviting. Roger's keen instincts kicked in, and with a determined tug, the dog dragged the box into the light. But the moment Bill laid eyes on it, a chill crept down his spine. The lockbox felt alive, as if it held secrets that were never meant to resurface. Items long lost to the passage of time began to appear around them, entwined in an unsettling dance of reality and illusion. What began as a simple search for supplies quickly spiraled into an unraveling mystery that would test the bonds of loyalty and challenge the very fabric of existence. Would this discovery lead Bill and Roger to salvation, or would it unveil a darkness that no man should dare confront? Before we dive deeper into their haunting journey, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you stumbled upon a forgotten treasure that seemed to breathe with a life of its own? Let's unravel this tale together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the desolate stretch of land where the old storage locker sat. Dust swirled in the dry breeze, dancing like restless spirits around the weathered wooden structure that seemed almost swallowed by the very earth it rested upon. Bill squinted against the sunlight, his rough-hewn face etched with the lines of hardship and time spent under the wide-open skies of the West. His companion Roger, a sturdy German shepherd, stood alert beside him, ears perked and nostrils flaring, as if sensing the unseen. "Come on, boy," Bill said, his voice a low rumble, gravelly from years of shouting across the plains. He reached down to scratch Roger behind the ears, a small gesture of camaraderie that spoke volumes of their bond. "Let's see what trouble's waiting for us in that old thing." They approached the storage locker, its paint chipped and peeling, revealing the bare wood beneath. Shadows danced across the ground as Bill stepped closer, his boot crunching on the gravel-strewn earth. "Don't know who thought it was wise to leave a hunk of junk like this out here," he muttered, eyeing the rusty padlock dangling from the hasp. "Probably full of moth-eaten blankets and broken dreams." Roger, however, had other ideas. He sniffed the air, tail stiffening as he moved around the perimeter of the locker, his instincts sharper than a coyote's howl at midnight. Bill watched, a frown creasing his brow. The dog had never been one to ignore a scent, and the way he circled made Bill's gut twist like a loose saddle. "Easy there, partner," Bill said, placing a reassuring hand on Roger's back. "What's got your hackles up?" With a sudden burst of energy, Roger darted toward a patch of weeds nearby, his nose buried in the ground. A moment later he emerged, proudly dragging a small, dusty lockbox behind him, its surface marred by the passage of time and neglect. Bill's brow furrowed deeper. What in tarnation? The lockbox was unlike anything Bill had seen before, ornate yet weathered, adorned with peculiar symbols that twisted and turned like the riverbed after a storm. "Looks like it's been here for ages," he said, kneeling down to inspect it closely. "But who'd leave something like this behind?" Roger sat beside him, panting softly, eyes bright and alert. Bill turned the box over in his hands, feeling its weight, an unsettling chill creeping up his spine as he traced the strange engravings. "Ain't nothing but a fancy coffin for secrets," he muttered. "But what kind of secret needs a box like this?" With a deep breath, he reached for the latch, a flicker of hesitation washing over him. The air felt heavy, as if the very atmosphere were charged with an unspoken tension. He could swear the wind carried whispers, swirling around him like lost souls seeking refuge. "Seems like this ain't just some old scrap, Roger," he said, a mix of curiosity and caution in his voice. Just then, a distant howl echoed across the plains, sending a shiver racing down Bill's spine. He glanced toward the horizon where the shadows lengthened, the sun dipping low and casting long fingers of darkness that reached for him. "We best not dawdle," he said, shaking off the unease that clung to him. "Whatever this is, it feels like it's not meant to be found." As he stood, the lockbox slipped from his grip, hitting the ground with a hollow thud. The sound echoed in the stillness, and in that instant the symbols on the box shimmered, as if ignited by some unseen force. Bill's breath hitched, and Roger growled low in his throat, a primal warning that made the hair on the back of Bill's neck stand on end. "What in Sam Hill?" Bill exclaimed, eyes widening as he took a step back. The ground beneath them felt alive, a gentle tremor racing through the earth, unsettling and strange. The air crackled, a tangible energy wrapping around him like a snake ready to strike. Roger barked, the sound sharp and urgent, breaking the spell of silence. Bill felt the weight of the moment, a pulse of something ancient thrumming just beneath the surface. He crouched down again, the instinct to flee battling with his curiosity. "We can't just leave it, Roger," he said, glancing back at the horizon where the last rays of sunlight flickered like dying embers. "What if it holds the answer to what's been disappear?" Before he could finish, the lockbox trembled violently, and then, with a sudden flash, it vanished from sight as if snatched away by some unseen hand. Bill's heart raced, a wild horse galloping through his chest. He looked at Roger, whose eyes were wide, a reflection of his own disbelief. "Did you see that?" Bill's voice was barely more than a whisper, the reality of their situation settling over him like a dark cloud. "We got ourselves a real mystery on our hands, boy." Roger, ever watchful, scanned the area, his instincts screaming that they weren't alone. Bill felt it too, a presence lurking just beyond the edges of the fading light. The shadows seemed to deepen, swallowing the last remnants of warmth, and as the night began to cloak the world in darkness, Bill knew they had stumbled onto something far more than they bargained for. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, as if urging him to leave, but Bill stood firm, a practical cowboy facing an unfathomable challenge. "We ain't done yet, Roger," he said, determination hardening his resolve. "This ain't just a ghost story, it's our story now." And with that, he set his jaw, ready to uncover the secrets hidden in the dark. Bill squared his shoulders, the chill of the night air wrapping around him like a damp blanket. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the earth beneath his boots, and peered into the growing shadows. "All right, Roger, let's not let this thing get the best of us." He squatted low, scanning the ground where the lockbox had once been. Perhaps there were clues left behind, something to guide him through the fog of uncertainty. The ground was pocked with rabbit holes and the tracks of wayward critters, but Bill's keen eyes searched for something out of the ordinary. His fingers brushed against the blades of grass, feeling for any disturbance in the earth's surface. "Ain't no way that box just up and vanished without a trace," he murmured, shaking his head. "It's got to be here somewhere." Roger trotted close, sniffing the air with a fervor that made Bill smile in the dark. The dog had a knack for sensing things long before any man could. "You got a good nose, partner," Bill said, patting Roger on the head. "If anyone can sniff out the truth, it's you." As the wind howled through the trees, it carried with it an eerie whisper, almost like a voice calling out from the beyond. Bill's heart thudded in his chest, but he pushed the fear away, focusing instead on the task at hand. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, well-worn handkerchief. With a quick flick of his wrist, he marked a spot in the dirt with a rock, creating a makeshift boundary where the box had vanished. "If we find it again, we'll know where to look," he said, his voice steadying. Roger remained vigilant, his ears perked up and nostrils flaring as he wandered to the edge of the tall grasses. The dog paused, tail rigid, and Bill could see the tension in his stance. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. The night seemed to hold its breath, and Bill felt a ripple of unease crawl along his spine. Just then, Roger barked sharply, breaking the stillness. He bounded toward a cluster of rocks, his snout pressing into the earth. Bill hurried after him, the adrenaline kicking in. "What have you found?" he called, his voice rising above the wind. As he drew closer, he spotted something gleaming in the moonlight, partially buried beneath a layer of dirt and debris. "By thunder!" Bill exclaimed as he knelt down, brushing away the soil with his fingers. It was a small, tarnished key, its surface etched with symbols similar to those on the lockbox. Bill's heart raced at the sight. Now, what in blazes would this unlock? Roger sniffed the key, then looked up at Bill, his eyes bright with intelligence, as if urging him to follow this new lead. Bill held the key in his palm, feeling the cold metal against his skin. "We best find out," he said, glancing around, his instincts sharpening as he felt the weight of the night pressing in around him. He stood and surveyed the area, pondering where the lockbox might have come from. If there was a key, there had to be a lock nearby. "Come on, let's see if we can track down where that thing might belong," he said, feeling the thrill of discovery pulse through him. The two made their way toward the tree line, where the shadows danced like specters in the moonlight. Bill scanned the terrain, his boots crunching softly on the dried leaves and twigs underfoot. He recalled stories of old cabins hidden deep in the woods, places long forgotten, where men had stashed their treasures and secrets away from prying eyes. Roger suddenly halted, ears perked, his body tense. Bill followed his gaze, noticing a flicker of movement among the trees. A small figure darted past, too quick to identify. Bill's pulse quickened, and he instinctively reached for his revolver, though he knew he had no intention of drawing it unless absolutely necessary. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Roger growled softly, low and threatening, the sound rumbling deep within his chest. "Let's be careful, boy," Bill urged, moving forward cautiously, the sound of the night enveloping them. The stars shone brightly above, but the woods felt thick with a heavy silence, as if the world was holding its breath. As they ventured deeper, Bill spotted remnants of an old stone foundation peeking through the underbrush. "Well, I'll be," he said, the thrill of discovery igniting a spark of hope in his heart. This must be it. The stones were crumbling and covered in moss, but the shape was unmistakable. A long-forgotten homestead that time had swallowed whole. He knelt beside the remnants, brushing away the damp foliage. If that lockbox had a purpose, it's likely tied to this place, he reasoned, the key in his pocket suddenly feeling heavier, its significance growing by the second. Roger sniffed around the perimeter, his instincts guiding him, while Bill inspected every inch of the ruins. As he searched, something glimmered in the corner of his eye. He turned, and there, half buried in the dirt, was a rusty old lock. Its mechanism was corroded, but still intact. Bill's breath caught in his throat. "This could be it, Roger. Let's see if this key fits." With trembling hands, he retrieved the key and approached the lock, the anticipation thrumming through him like the beat of a war drum. He inserted the key into the lock, its cold metal fitting snugly. He turned it slowly, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoing in the stillness, and then, with a soft click, the lock turned. The moment hung in the air, electric and charged. Bill exchanged a glance with Roger, who seemed to sense the gravity of what was about to unfold. He took a deep breath and pulled the door open, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the old stones, a hollowed-out space that had been sealed away from the world for who knew how long. The darkness within beckoned, an invitation to uncover whatever lay hidden beneath the weight of years. Bill felt a mix of fear and determination as he reached inside, ready to unveil the secrets of the past. "Whatever we find, it's our story now, partner," he said, his voice steady and resolute. As the darkness swallowed them whole, Bill knew they were on the brink of discovering something that could change everything. As the door creaked open, the air that escaped felt stale and cold, a stark contrast to the warm night outside. Bill squinted into the darkness, the faint glow of moonlight just managing to illuminate the edges of what lay within. Shadows played tricks on his eyes, warping the contours of forgotten relics buried deep within the hollow. He felt Roger's presence close by, the dog's low growl a reminder that they were not alone in this unearthly stillness. "Stay close, boy," Bill murmured, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Let's not go stirring up any ghosts tonight." With one hand resting on the rough stone wall for balance, he ventured deeper into the compartment. The ground was uneven, scattered with stones and the remnants of what seemed like old tools, long abandoned. A twinge of nostalgia tugged at his heart. It was as if he could feel the echoes of lives once lived in this forgotten place. Using his lantern, he cast a wide beam of light, revealing strange markings on the walls, symbols etched with a precision that belied the age of the structure. They looked like a map of sorts, but one that led nowhere Bill recognized. "What in tarnation?" he whispered, stepping closer to examine the engravings. Each symbol felt charged with a history, a story waiting to be told. "You reckon these are some kind of directions, Roger?" Roger sniffed at the wall, his nose twitching as he explored the scent of history. His ears perked up, catching sounds that were just beyond Bill's hearing. The dog's instinct was always sharp, and tonight was no different. Bill could see it in the way Roger shifted, alert and ready to protect his master from unseen dangers. Bill turned his attention back to the contents of the hidden space. As he scanned the area with renewed fervor, his eyes landed on a small, tattered leather pouch nestled between two stones. With cautious fingers, he pulled it free, feeling the weight of something solid inside. He opened it carefully, revealing a handful of strange, polished stones. Each one was unlike any rock he'd seen before, shimmering with an otherworldly glow that seemed to pulse gently in the dim light. "What in the name of Sam Hill are these?" he wondered aloud, his heart racing. He lifted one of the stones closer to his lantern, and as the light hit it, the colors danced. Blues and greens swirling in patterns that felt almost alive. He thought he saw faces within the stones, distorted images that twisted and shifted, but when he blinked, they were gone. Bill glanced over at Roger, who was now standing perfectly still, his eyes fixated on a point beyond the stone walls. "You see something, boy?" The dog's low growl returned, more pronounced this time, vibrating in the still air. A chill crept up Bill's spine. "We ain't alone, are we?" The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he slowly turned, the lantern's beam sweeping across the shadows. The oppressive silence of the woods pressed against him like a weight. Just as he was about to call out again, a rustling came from the entrance of the compartment. He stiffened, his breath hitching in his throat. "Show yourself!" he called out, his voice steady but edged with tension. Roger barked sharply, moving closer to Bill, his stance protective. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. Then, from the darkness, a figure stepped forward, cloaked in shadows but unmistakably human. Bill squinted, trying to make out the details. "Who's there?" he demanded, hand instinctively drifting toward his holster. The figure halted, raising a hand as if to show they meant no harm. "Easy now, cowboy," came a voice that was smooth like river stones, yet laced with an undertone that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. "I ain't here to cause trouble." "Then what do you want?" Bill said, his voice firm. "You got no business lurking in these woods." The figure stepped into the lantern's glow, revealing a young woman with wild hair and eyes that shimmered with an almost unnatural brightness. "I'm just looking for something that's been lost," she replied, her gaze flicking to the stones in Bill's hand. "And it seems you've found it." Bill felt the weight of her words. "What do you mean? These stones?" He glanced at Roger, who was still on high alert, but seemed momentarily calmed by the presence of the woman. She nodded, stepping closer, her expression earnest yet cautious. "They're not just rocks. They hold power, a connection to this land and the spirits that walk it. But they belong to someone who's been wronged. You must understand, this isn't just a matter of ownership." "Spirits, huh?" Bill said, skepticism creeping into his tone. "You expect me to believe that? You think I'm going to hand these over without a fight?" "Not a fight," she countered, her voice calming yet insistent. "A choice. You can help restore balance, or you can keep them and face the consequences. The atmosphere thickened with her words, the weight of the night closing in. Bill felt the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, a reminder of the ancient stories that swirled around him, waiting to be heard. The light flickered, casting shadows that danced like phantoms, and Roger growled softly once more, sensing the gravity of the moment. Bill's heart raced. What choice would he make? The lantern flickered, casting elongated shadows that swayed against the rough-hewn walls of the storage compartment, making the atmosphere feel even more oppressive. Bill's mind raced as he stared at the woman before him, her wild hair framing a face that seemed to glow with an inner light. "What kind of balance are you talking about?" he asked, his voice steady, despite the turmoil swirling in his gut. She took a step closer, her expression earnest as she studied him. These stones were part of a sacred site. Long before your kind trod this land, they're conduits for the spirits, and they've been disturbed. Her gaze flickered to the polished stones cradled in his palm. They need to be returned, or the spirits will grow restless. And when spirits grow restless, they don't just haunt, they wreak havoc. Bill's brow furrowed as he considered her words. He had heard tales of spirits and hauntings, stories shared over campfires, but he always dismissed them as old wives' tales. Yet there was a weight in the air, a tension that made his skin prickle. Roger, ever perceptive, shifted beside him, nudging Bill with his nose, as if urging him to heed the warning hidden in her words. "Listen, I ain't one for ghost stories," Bill said, his tone cautious. "But if what you say is true, how do I know you ain't just spinning a yarn to get your hands on these?" He glanced down at the stones, feeling their cool surface against his palm. The woman's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing. "You'll know by what happens next. If you keep them, you'll feel the weight of their anger. If you return them, you might just find peace for both yourself and the land." Bill's mind wandered to his own grief, the heavy sorrow that had settled in his heart since losing his wife. "And what if I choose wrong?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then you'll find out what it means to have the land's anger directed at you," she replied, her voice steady. "But the choice is yours." He looked at Roger, whose ears were perked, alert to every sound beyond the confines of the storage area. The dog seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, and Bill felt a surge of loyalty swell within him. He had always trusted Roger's instincts, and now wasn't the time to abandon that trust. "All right," Bill said, his voice resolute. "Let's say I believe you. What do I do with these stones?" She stepped back slightly, allowing him to make his decision. "There's a grove not far from here, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. You'll know it when you see it. Gather the stones there and call to the spirits. Ask for forgiveness for the wrongs that have been done. They'll guide you if your heart is true." Bill felt a shiver race down his spine, but the idea of restoring balance sparked a flicker of hope within him. "And if I don't?" he pressed. "Then the spirits will come for what they believe is theirs," she said, her voice firm. "And they won't be gentle." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Bill could almost hear the whispering winds outside, as if they carried secrets of their own. He took a deep breath, glancing once more at the stones, then at the woman who had appeared in his hour of need. "Fine," he said finally, resolve hardening his voice. "But I reckon I ain't doing this alone. You'll come with me." A smile broke across her face, and for a fleeting moment the shadows seemed to recede. "You've got more sense than I thought, cowboy. My name's Clara, by the way, and I'll gladly lend my aid. The spirits respond to more than just words. They listen to the heart." With a nod, Bill tucked the pouch back into his coat, feeling the cool stones against his chest. He turned to Roger, who was still watching Clara with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You ready, boy?" he asked, and Roger gave a soft bark, tail wagging just enough to show he was on board. As they stepped out into the night, the moon hung high above, casting silver beams across the landscape. The woods were alive with the sounds of the night, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, and somewhere in the distance, a lone owl hooted. Bill led the way, the path winding through the trees like a serpent. Clara walked beside him, her presence grounding in the eerie stillness of the night. "What's your story, Clara?" Bill asked as they made their way deeper into the woods, the lantern's glow flickering as shadows danced around them. She hesitated for a moment, her gaze fixed on the ground, as if searching for the right words. "I'm a seeker, you could say. I've been drawn to this land for reasons I can't fully explain. The stories of the past speak to me, and I felt a pull to this place. I've seen the spirits, and I know their pain. It's my mission to help heal what's been broken." Bill nodded, his heart heavy with understanding. "Sounds like a tall order, but I reckon we all have our burdens to carry." "Indeed," she replied, her tone softening. "And sometimes we need a little help from one another." As they pressed on, the woods grew denser, the shadows thickening around them. Roger paused suddenly, his nose to the ground, and Bill could feel the tension in the air shift. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, glancing around. Roger growled softly, eyes darting to the left where the underbrush rustled ominously. The hairs on Bill's arms stood on end. "I don't like the feeling of this," he muttered, tightening his grip on the lantern. "We might not be alone out here." "Stay close," Clara said, her voice steady. "The spirits can sense our presence. They may be curious, or they may be cautious. Either way, we need to tread lightly." The atmosphere grew thick with anticipation as they continued, each step echoing in the night. Bill couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching them from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The trees loomed overhead, twisted and gnarled like the hands of forgotten souls, and the chill of the night wrapped around him like a shroud. With each passing moment, the distance to the grove seemed to stretch, a winding labyrinth that tested his resolve. But Bill pressed on, driven by the hope of restoring what had been lost, knowing that even the darkest paths could lead to unexpected light. The deeper they ventured into the woods, the more the night seemed to thrum with an unseen energy. The gnarled branches twisted overhead like the fingers of ancient spectres, and the underbrush rustled with the sounds of unseen creatures. Bill kept his lantern held high, its flickering light casting long shadows that danced ominously along the trunks of the trees. Roger trotted ahead, alert as a hawk, sniffing the air and pausing now and then to listen intently, his ears perked like little sails catching the wind. "Feels like we're walking into a ghost story," Bill muttered, trying to shake the chill that crept down his spine. "You reckon this grove you mentioned is far?" "Not far now," Clara replied, her voice unwavering despite the eerie surroundings. "Just a bit further, past the old willow. That tree's been here longer than any of us, and it holds many secrets." "Secrets, huh?" Bill said, brow furrowing as he peered into the darkness. "Seems like this whole place is a wellspring of 'em. I reckon a fellow could get lost in the past if he ain't careful." "Or find himself," Clara countered, a knowing glint in her eye. "The past can be a heavy load, but it's also a key to understanding our present." Bill nodded, chewing on her words as they pressed on. He had always been a man of the land, relying on practical knowledge, tracking animals, reading the sky, and understanding the lay of the land. Yet, as they wandered deeper into the night, he felt an unfamiliar kind of knowledge stirring within him, something more instinctive, more primal. The rustling of the leaves above intensified, and Bill stopped suddenly, his heart racing. Roger had frozen, staring into the thick underbrush with a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might disturb whatever lay beyond their lantern's glow. Clara's eyes narrowed, her face serious. "Listen," she instructed softly. The world around them quieted, the nocturnal chorus fading into an expectant silence. It was then that Bill heard it, a distant whispering like the sigh of the wind through the trees, but woven with voices that felt familiar yet foreign. "What in tarnation?" Bill breathed, a shiver racing down his spine. "Spirits," Clara said, her voice steady. "They sense us. It's time we move forward." With a nod, Bill resumed his cautious pace, keeping Roger close. The dog seemed to navigate the terrain with a confidence that belied his breed, guiding Bill around roots and rocks as they made their way toward the willow tree Clara had mentioned. The air thickened with a sense of purpose, and Bill could feel the weight of the stones in his pocket, pressing against him like a reminder of the task ahead. As they approached the old willow, its branches draped like a tattered cloak, the whispers grew louder, filling the air with an almost tangible energy. Bill could see now that the ground was littered with stones, some smooth and round, others jagged and worn. A chill crept into the air, and he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Right here," Clara said, stopping before the great tree. "This is where we'll gather what we need. The spirits will guide us." Bill knelt, brushing his fingers over the stones at his feet. They were unlike any he had seen before. Each one seemed to pulse with a faint light, as though they held the essence of something long forgotten. "What do I do?" he asked, glancing up at Clara. "Arrange them in a circle," she instructed, her eyes scanning the area as if sensing something he couldn't. "Then place the stones from your pouch within the circle. Speak your truth to the spirits and listen with your heart. They'll know if your intentions are pure." Bill swallowed hard, heart racing as he began to arrange the stones in a careful circle, feeling the weight of the task settle upon his shoulders. Roger sat beside him, ears alert, watching the darkness beyond the willow's branches, as if he sensed a presence waiting just out of sight. As Bill placed the final stone, a gust of wind whipped through the grove, swirling leaves and dust in a chaotic dance. The lantern flickered wildly, and Bill's breath caught in his throat as a spectral glow began to emanate from the stones. The air shimmered, and figures began to coalesce within the light. Shadows of those who had come before, their faces etched with sorrow and longing. "By the spirits of the past," Bill said, voice steady but quaking inside, "I stand here with a heart full of regret. I seek your forgiveness for the wrongs done. Help me find the path to restore what was lost." The whispers grew louder, swirling around him like a tempest, and Bill felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. He glanced at Clara, who stood resolutely beside him, a beacon of strength amidst the swirling shadows. The glow of the stones intensified, casting eerie shapes against the tree trunk, and Bill felt the power of the grove pulling him deeper into its mystery. In that moment, the very air felt alive, alive with stories waiting to be told. Yet beneath that weighty energy, an undercurrent of fear gnawed at him. The spirits were restless, their message not yet clear, and in that moment of vulnerability, he realized something fundamental. This was not merely a quest for forgiveness, but a reckoning with the past that could change everything. "Stay sharp, Roger," Bill whispered, feeling the dog's protective instinct surge as the grove seemed to pulse with anticipation. "We ain't out of the woods yet." With a flicker of fear and hope intertwined, Bill took a deep breath and steadied himself for whatever came next, knowing the answers lay within the shadows. The wind howled through the willow branches, a mournful sound that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. He could feel the spirits swirling around him, their presence a heavy cloak on his shoulders. Clara stood beside him, her silhouette framed by the lantern's flickering light, her expression resolute as she continued to watch the shadows dance. "Don't lose your nerve, Bill," she whispered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The spirits know your heart. You just gotta listen." Bill nodded, though doubt clawed at him. He crouched low, examining the glow of the stones, each one casting a faint luminescence that seemed to pulse with an inner life. The whispers grew louder, forming an unintelligible chorus that filled the air with a sense of urgency. He sensed the spirits were waiting for him to act, to push through the veil that separated their world from his. "All right, then," he muttered, his voice trembling slightly. "What do you want me to see?" With that, he reached into his pocket, pulling out the small stones he had brought along. He placed each one within the circle, feeling the energy shift as they settled into the earth. The moment the last stone touched the ground beneath him trembled lightly, as though the very soil was awakening. Roger, ever vigilant, let out a low growl, his nose twitching as he scanned the shadowy periphery. Bill glanced down at his faithful companion, who had become more alert, his fur bristling slightly. "Easy, boy. Whatever's out there, we'll face it together." Suddenly, a voice cut through the whispers, sharp and clear, like a gunshot in the stillness. "You seek the truth?" it asked, resonating from somewhere deep within the light. The voice was not harsh, but it carried the weight of ages, echoing with wisdom and pain. "Yes," Bill called out, desperation lacing his voice. "I seek to mend what's been broken." The light flickered, and from within the glow, a figure began to materialize, a woman with long, flowing hair that shimmered like silver in the lantern's light. Her eyes, though full of sorrow, held a depth that seemed to pull at the very fabric of Bill's soul. "Many have come seeking forgiveness, but few understand the cost," she said, her voice soft yet firm, a gentle wind stirring the leaves around them. "Your past holds the key, but to unlock it, you must confront your own demons." Bill's heart raced. He could feel the weight of the past pressing upon him, memories flooding in like an unrelenting tide. I lost my family," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I didn't protect them, and I don't know how to atone." The spirit's gaze softened, and she gestured toward the circle of stones. "The stones you've gathered are remnants of the old ways, remnants of those who have passed. They hold stories, truths long buried. Speak to them, and they shall guide you." He hesitated, glancing back at Clara, whose expression was a mix of encouragement and caution. "What do I say?" he asked her. "Speak from your heart," she replied, her voice steady. "Tell them your truth, but be ready to listen, Bill. The spirits will respond in ways you might not expect." Taking a deep breath, Bill turned back to the glowing stones. "I am sorry for my failures," he began, each word heavy with emotion. "I failed to protect those I loved, and now I feel lost in this life without them. I am ready to face whatever it takes to set things right." As the final words left his mouth, the wind howled louder, and the shadows surged forward, coalescing into forms that resembled figures from his past. He could see fleeting glimpses of his family, their faces blurred, but filled with love and sadness. His heart ached, a hollow echo of grief swelling within him. "Do not be afraid, Bill," the spirit woman said, her voice a soothing balm to his turmoil. "Your journey has not ended. It has merely changed course. There are truths you must unearth, and they lie beneath the stones." Before Bill could respond, the ground beneath him shook violently, and the lantern flickered out, plunging them into darkness. Roger barked sharply, instinctively pressing closer to Bill, his warm body a comforting presence in the encroaching void. "Clara!" Bill shouted, his voice rising above the howling wind. "What do we do?" "Stay together," she called back, her voice a beacon in the dark. "We need to light the stones again." With trembling hands, Bill fumbled for the matches in his pocket, the chill of the night sinking into his bones. Come on," he muttered under his breath as he struck a match against the rough fabric of his jeans. The flame flickered to life, casting long shadows that danced wildly around him. With the light, he quickly ignited the lantern again, its warm glow pushing back the darkness. The grove was transformed, the spectral figures shimmering just beyond the reach of the lantern's light, their whispers now a soft, haunting melody. "What lies beneath the stones?" Bill asked, feeling the intensity of their gazes pressing against him. "The truth of your heart," the spirit woman replied, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Dig deep, and you shall find the answers you seek. But beware, the path to understanding may reveal what you're not ready to face." A sense of urgency coursed through him. "Then let's dig," he declared, the resolve hardening in his chest. "We need to uncover whatever's hidden here, together." Bill knelt by the stones, and as he began to clear away the dirt and debris, he could feel Roger's warm breath against his cheek, the dog's steady presence a reminder that he was not alone. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, almost as if the spirits were urging him onward, urging him to unearth the secrets that had long lain buried in this haunted grove. Bill knelt among the stones, each one cold and rough against his palm, a reminder of the weight he carried. He cleared the dirt away methodically, his heart pounding in rhythm with the whispers that swirled around him. The lantern's flickering light cast eerie shapes on the nearby trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers against the night sky. "Easy there, Bill," Clara said, her voice low and steady, the tension palpable in the air. "You don't want to stir up something that don't want to be disturbed." Bill nodded, though he felt the urgency clawing at him like a coyote at a rabbit hole. "I reckon whatever's hidden here might be the only way to find peace." He dug deeper, his fingers brushing against something solid. It was cool to the touch, unlike the stones around it. "Roger, come here, boy," Bill called, and the dog responded instantly, bounding over to his side, tail wagging but ears perked up in alertness. Roger sniffed at the spot where Bill's fingers had found purchase, his dark eyes scanning the surrounding shadows. The dog let out a low growl, a sound that sent chills racing down Bill's spine. "What's got you all riled up, boy?" Bill asked, glancing toward the spectral figures that hovered just out of reach. Their whispers were a chorus of sorrow, urging him to unearth the truth. With a grunt, Bill cleared more dirt until he uncovered a small iron lockbox, its surface rusted and encrusted with soil. "Well, what do we have here?" he murmured, brushing away the last remnants of earth that had cloaked it for who knows how long. The box was adorned with intricate designs that twisted and turned like the very trails of the frontier. As Bill worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that the air around him grew heavier, charged with a kind of energy that crackled like static before a storm. Clara knelt beside him, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "You sure you want to open that, Bill? There's a reason folks left this behind." Bill took a deep breath, wiping sweat from his brow, the cool night air doing little to alleviate the heat of his rising anxiety. "Ain't no use in fearing the unknown, Clara. If it leads me to what I need, then it's worth the risk." Roger nudged his hand, and Bill felt a rush of gratitude for his loyal companion. With a resolute nod, he lifted the lockbox, feeling its weight in his hands. The latch was rusted shut, but with a firm twist of his wrist, he pulled it open. A cloud of dust erupted, swirling in the lantern's light like spirits fleeing from their prison. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, lay a bundle wrapped in leather. Bill lifted it out, careful not to damage the delicate fabric. As he unwrapped it, his heart raced. It was a collection of old letters, their edges yellowed and brittle, penned in a flowing script that spoke of love, loss, and longing. "What do they say?" Clara leaned closer, her breath hitching with intrigue. Bill glanced at the first letter, the familiar handwriting striking a chord deep within him. "It's from my wife," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "She wrote about the day we lost the ranch to that storm, the day everything changed." He read aloud, his voice steady yet laced with emotion. "Bill, I don't know how to keep the homestead alive without you. The wind howls like a banshee, and I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. I worry for our little ones, for the life we built together." The words felt like a dagger to his heart, each line a reminder of the life he had failed to protect. Bill's throat tightened as he pressed on through the letters, each one revealing more of the anguish and heartache his family endured in his absence. Clara's hand rested on his shoulder, a silent encouragement. "You can't change the past, Bill, but maybe these letters hold a clue to what you need to do now." Roger, still alert, suddenly perked up, his ears pointed toward the grove's edge. Bill glanced up, his gut twisting as he noticed the shadows had shifted, darker shapes swirling just beyond the lantern's glow. The air felt thick with a presence, something unseen yet palpably near. "Clara, you see that?" Bill asked, his voice low and urgent. The dog began to growl again, deeper this time, as if sensing a danger that lurked just beyond sight. The spirit woman's voice echoed in his mind, warning him of the cost of truth. He turned back to the letters, intent on finding answers, but the encroaching darkness was becoming more than just a figment of the night. A low rumble rolled through the trees, and the whispers escalated to a cacophony, a frantic call for attention. "Bill, we need to go," Clara urged, her eyes wide with fear. "Whatever's out there don't seem friendly." Just as Bill was about to respond, a gust of wind blew through the grove, extinguishing the lantern's light, plunging them into darkness once more. The lockbox clattered to the ground, letters scattering like leaves caught in a storm. Bill's heart raced, and he felt the cold grip of panic as he reached for Roger, who stood firm, protectively at his side. "Clara, hold on to me," Bill shouted, feeling the weight of the night closing in. "We ain't done yet. We gotta find the truth." With Roger leading the way, Bill stepped forward into the darkness, the ghosts of his past swirling around him, their whispers an urgent reminder that the path to redemption lay ahead, hidden in the shadows, but waiting to be uncovered. The chill of the night seemed to grow thicker as Bill pressed forward, his heart pounding like a wild stallion galloping down the open plains. The darkness wrapped around him, and Clara like a cloak. But with Roger leading the way, they ventured deeper into the unknown, eyes scanning for any sign of danger. The whispers in the wind curled through the trees, a haunting melody that echoed of secrets long buried. "Keep your eyes peeled, Clara," Bill said, his voice barely above a murmur. "Something's off tonight." "I feel it too," she replied, her voice trembling as she clutched Bill's arm tighter. "It's like the earth itself is holding its breath." Bill's mind raced, the letters still swirling in his thoughts like a tempest. He had always believed that the past was a locked door, but now it felt more like a winding path, each letter a stepping stone towards the truth. He could almost hear Margaret's voice, each word she penned resonating in his ears. A cost of truth, he thought. "What kind of price am I fixing to pay?" Roger, ever vigilant, paused at the edge of the grove, nose to the ground, sniffing the air like a seasoned tracker. Bill knelt beside him, resting a hand on the dog's sturdy back. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice low and steady. The dog's growl softened to a low rumble, ears flicking back and forth as if deciphering the forest's secrets. "Maybe we ought to backtrack," Clara suggested, her eyes wide with apprehension as she scanned the trees, shadows dancing like wraiths in the underbrush. "This ain't right, Bill. I can feel something watching us." "Nah," Bill replied, a stubborn determination hardening his resolve. "We got a job to do. Those letters, they might hold more than just memories. Let's see what else we can find." He carefully picked up a few scattered letters from the ground, their edges curling like autumn leaves. As he sifted through them, one caught his eye. The paper was different, thicker and embossed with a seal he didn't recognize. "Clara, look at this," he said, holding it up for her to see. "Looks important," she replied, leaning in to examine the ornate seal. "What do you reckon it means?" "Could be a clue," Bill mused, his fingers brushing over the intricate design. "Might lead us to the reason why this place was abandoned. Let's get somewhere a mite safer and take a closer look." With Roger at the lead again, Bill and Clara retraced their steps, heading toward the nearby barn that had seen better days. The old structure loomed like a ghost of its former self, timbers weathered and weary, but it offered a sense of shelter. As they approached, the wind whispered through the gaps in the wood, an eerie serenade that sent shivers down their spines. Inside, the barn was dark, but for the thin beams of moonlight filtering through the cracks. Dust motes danced in the air like tiny spirits caught in the glow. Bill found a spot against the wall and sat down, laying the letter across his knee. Clara took a seat beside him, her expression a mixture of curiosity and fear. "Let's see what this one says," Bill murmured, peeling back the wax seal with care. The letter unfurled like a secret waiting to be revealed, and as he read, the air thickened with anticipation. "To whom it may concern," he read aloud, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the words. "This land holds more than soil and stone. It is a place where spirits linger, trapped by the echoes of their past. Should you seek to uncover the truth, beware the shadows that dwell within. They know your heart and seek to claim it." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What in tarnation does that mean?" Bill swallowed hard, the weight of the letter settling heavily in his gut. "It means we ain't alone in this. Whatever we're stirring up, it doesn't want to be found." Roger suddenly barked, snapping Bill out of his reverie. The dog darted to the barn door, sniffing at the air, muscles tense and ready. Bill's heart raced as he exchanged a glance with Clara, who was now pale as a fresh winter snow. "Something's out there," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "Stay close, Clara," he instructed, his own voice a low growl. "Roger's got a nose for danger." As if on cue, the shadows outside began to deepen, swirling and shifting like a gathering storm. Bill stood, pushing aside the fear clawing at his insides. They had come too far to turn back now. We need to finish this. There's more to learn, and I reckon it's time we find out what it is. With renewed determination, Bill stepped toward the barn door, Roger at his side, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The air crackled with an electric tension, and in that moment, Bill understood that the ghosts of his past were not merely haunting memories. They were a reckoning, a challenge that would lead him to the truth he so desperately sought. Together, they ventured forth into the night where the past and present converged, ready to confront whatever lay hidden in the shadows. The weight of destiny hung heavy, but Bill felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the answers he sought could bring him peace, even in the face of the unknown. The moon hung high, a silver dollar in a sky smeared with ink, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. As Bill stepped out of the barn, he felt the cool air wrap around him like a shroud. Shadows flickered and danced among the trees, and the rustling leaves whispered secrets he could not quite decipher. Roger, his loyal dog, stayed close, the tension in his body palpable, nose quivering as he sniffed the air for any sign of danger. "Stick close, partner," Bill murmured, his hand resting on the hilt of his revolver. The weight of the gun was a familiar comfort, a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, he had tools to defend himself and Clara. "We don't know what's out there, but I reckon it ain't friendly." Clara followed just behind him, her breath coming in quickened bursts. "I don't like this one bit, Bill. Those words in that letter, they feel like a warning. Spirits lingering and shadows that know our hearts. Sounds like a tale spun from a fever dream." "Maybe so," Bill replied, moving cautiously toward the edge of the clearing. "But if we're gonna find the truth, we gotta press on. The past don't always stay buried." He paused, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. "Let's head toward the creek. We can follow it upstream. It might lead us to something." As they walked, the soft sounds of the wilderness enveloped them, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, and the gentle gurgle of the creek ahead. But there was something else, too, a low hum in the air that sent a chill down Bill's spine. It was as if the very land was alive, whispering secrets just beyond his reach. Roger stopped suddenly, ears perked and body tense. Bill followed the dog's gaze, his heart racing as he squinted into the darkness. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, from the depths of the trees, a shape emerged, a figure cloaked in shadow, moving with an unnatural grace. Bill's breath hitched in his throat. "Clara, get behind me," he ordered, stepping forward, his hand tightening around his gun. The figure paused, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign, as if it were a memory pulled from the depths of his mind. It was a woman, her long hair billowing like smoke around her, eyes glinting like shards of glass in the moonlight. "You seek the truth, Bill," she said, her voice smooth as silk yet laced with an undercurrent of sorrow. "But the truth is not always what you expect." "Who are you?" Bill demanded, his voice steady but his heart racing. "What do you want?" "I am but a keeper of stories," she replied, stepping closer, her presence both alluring and ominous. "You've come to unearth the past, but beware, it holds both treasures and traps. Many have come before you, seeking answers, and not all have returned." Clara stepped up beside Bill, her face pale but fierce. "What do you mean? What happened to them?" The woman's gaze flickered toward the ground, and Bill sensed a deep sadness radiating from her. "Their hearts were heavy with sorrow, and the land claimed them. The shadows are hungry, and they will not let you go easily. You must confront the pain that binds you here." Bill's mind raced, thoughts of his lost loved ones swirling like a tempest in his heart. "I'm not afraid of shadows," he said, though he felt the tremor in his voice. "I'm here for answers, and I won't turn back." "Then follow the creek, but know this," the woman warned, her voice a haunting echo that resonated through the trees. "Every truth comes with a price. Remember, the past is never truly gone. It only waits for the right moment to rise again." With that, she faded into the shadows, leaving only the whisper of her presence behind. Bill stood frozen, grappling with the weight of her words. Clara's hand gripped his arm tightly. "What in the world just happened?" she breathed. "I reckon that was a warning," Bill replied, his pulse quickening. "We need to keep moving. If the shadows are as hungry as she says, we might not have much time." As they resumed their trek along the creek, the moonlight glimmered on the water's surface, illuminating the path ahead, but casting eerie reflections that danced like phantoms. Roger stayed alert, ever watchful for any signs of trouble. "Bill," Clara called softly, her voice trembling. "What do you think she meant about the pain that binds us? You've been through a lot, with the loss of your family. Is that what she's talking about?" He nodded, the ache in his chest growing heavier. "I reckon it is. The past has a way of holding on to a man, especially when he hasn't made peace with it." He paused, searching for the right words. "But I can't let it keep me from finding what I need to know. Not now, not when the answers feel so close." As they rounded a bend in the creek, something glimmered in the moonlight, half buried in the mud. Bill approached it cautiously, kneeling to investigate. It was an old locket, its surface tarnished, but still holding a delicate engraving, a pair of intertwined hearts. He picked it up, feeling the cool metal against his skin, and something about it sent a jolt through him. "Clara, look here," he called, holding it up for her to see. "This locket, it belonged to someone once, didn't it?" She knelt beside him, her eyes widening. "Could be. It looks like it's been here a spell. What do you think it means?" "I don't rightly know," Bill admitted, turning it over in his hands. "But I reckon it's another piece of the puzzle. Maybe it belonged to one of those folks the woman warned us about." Suddenly, Roger growled low, his fur bristling as he stared into the darkness beyond the creek. Bill's heart thudded in his chest as he felt the air shift around them. "We need to move," he urged, pocketing the locket. "Whatever's lurking out there, I don't want to meet it face to face." As they picked up their pace, the shadows deepened, the night closing in around them like a vice. But with each step, Bill felt a fierce determination rising within him. He had come to confront the shadows of his past, and he would not turn back now. The truth awaited, and with it, perhaps the chance to finally lay his own ghosts to rest. Bill pressed forward, the locket nestled in his pocket, feeling its cold weight as a constant reminder of the mysteries waiting to be unraveled. The creek wound through the landscape like a serpent, twisting and turning beneath the pale moon, and every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs set his senses on edge. Roger walked close, his nose to the ground, keen to the scent of whatever lay ahead. "Bill," Clara whispered, her voice barely above the sound of the water rushing by, "do you think we'll find anything else? Something that might make sense of all this?" "Could be," he replied, glancing down at Roger, who had stopped to sniff the air. The dog's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl, a warning bell ringing through the silence. Bill could feel the tension in the air as thick as molasses. "Just stay close, darling. Whatever's out here doesn't seem too friendly." With Roger leading the way, the trio pressed on, each step punctuated by the distant croaking of frogs and the rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, swallowing the moonlight and casting ghostly shapes that danced just out of sight. "Maybe we ought to set up camp," Clara suggested after a few minutes, her breath misting in the cool night air. "If we're going to be poking around in dark places, we should at least have a fire for light." "Not a bad idea," Bill conceded, though the thought of sitting still in this eerie landscape sent a chill down his spine. "Let's find a spot that feels a mite safer, away from the creek where we might not attract unwanted company." They soon found a small clearing bordered by gnarled trees that twisted like old men in a barroom brawl, their roots sprawling out like fingers clawing at the earth. Bill set about gathering dry branches and fallen leaves, while Clara searched for larger logs to serve as seats. Roger patrolled the perimeter, his instincts sharp as a tack, and Bill couldn't shake the feeling that the dog knew more than he let on. As the fire crackled to life, casting a warm glow around their little camp, Bill felt a momentary sense of safety. He pulled the locket from his pocket, inspecting it under the flickering flames. "This here locket, it must have meant something to someone," he said, showing it to Clara. "It could be a key to this whole mess." Clara leaned in closer, the firelight dancing in her eyes. You think it's connected to the woman we met, or to those folks who disappeared? Hard to say, Bill admitted, turning it over in his hands. But if it belonged to someone who was lost, then maybe their story is what we need to uncover. He felt the need to dig deeper, to turn the stone over and see what lay beneath. Let's see if there's anything inside. He opened the locket carefully, revealing a faded photograph of a young couple, their faces radiant with joy. A chill crept up his spine. The woman bore a striking resemblance to the spectre they had encountered, the same wild hair and sorrowful eyes. "Clara, look here," he said, holding it out for her to see. "Goodness," Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's like she stepped right out of the past. But who are they? And what does it have to do with us?" "I reckon we'll have to do some digging to find out," Bill replied, a determined glint in his eyes. "But first, we ought to be mindful. Whatever's haunting these parts ain't gonna take kindly to our nosing around." As the fire crackled, Bill felt a strange pull towards the creek once more, the urge to follow its winding path growing stronger. "How about we take a closer look at the water?" he suggested, glancing at Clara. "Maybe it'll give us more clues about what happened here." "Okay," she agreed, though her voice quivered slightly. "But let's keep Roger close. I don't like the way the night feels." With Roger leading the way, they made their way back toward the creek, the water glistening under the moonlight like a ribbon of silver. As they approached, Bill noticed something strange on the opposite bank, an old, dilapidated cabin that seemed to have grown from the very earth itself, vines climbing up its weathered walls. "Now, what in tarnation is that?" Bill muttered, squinting in the dim light. "That ain't on any map I've ever seen." Clara's eyes widened. "Should we go check it out? It might hold more secrets." "Could be," Bill replied, weighing the idea. "But we ought to be cautious. If the shadows are hungry, they might be waiting for us inside." They crept along the bank, the sound of the creek muffling their footsteps. Roger stopped suddenly, nose raised, fixating on the cabin as though he could sense something lurking just beyond its door. Bill shared a glance with Clara, and they exchanged an unspoken agreement. They had come too far to turn back now. "Let's go," he whispered, heart pounding in his chest as they made their way to the old structure. The door hung ajar, creaking softly in the breeze, as if beckoning them to enter. Bill felt a rush of excitement and fear, a cocktail of emotions swirling within him. What stories lay within those walls? What truths awaited them, waiting to be uncovered by the light of their flickering lanterns? With a deep breath, Bill pushed the door wide open, the hinges groaning in protest. Shadows danced across the walls, and as they stepped inside, the air thickened with a sense of foreboding. Dust motes swirled in the beam of moonlight streaming through broken windows, and the remnants of a life, long forgotten, whispered from the corners of the room. "Keep your eyes peeled," Bill cautioned, feeling the weight of the past pressing in around them. "We might be stirring up more than just old memories." The air inside the cabin was thick with dust, a heavy cloak of silence wrapping around Bill and Clara as they stepped over the threshold. The scent of decay mingled with the earthy aroma of aged wood, creating a pungent reminder of time's relentless march. Bill's heart raced as he scanned the dim interior, the faint light of their lantern flickering like a nervous breath. Clara hesitated just inside the door, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. "Feels like this place has been waiting for us," she whispered, clutching her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Shadows lurked in every corner, seeming to pulse with the echoes of lives once lived. "Could be," Bill replied, his voice low and steady. He stepped further inside, careful not to disturb the layers of dust that lay like a shroud over everything. "Let's see what we can find." Roger, ever the vigilant sentinel, moved ahead of them, sniffing the air and darting his gaze toward the darkened corners of the room. Bill admired the dog's instincts. Roger had a knack for sensing trouble before it even stirred. "Good boy," he murmured, patting the dog's side as they passed. The cabin was small, its walls lined with remnants of furniture long since abandoned. An overturned chair lay against a wall, its legs splintered like a broken dream, while a rusty stove huddled in one corner, a skeletal reminder of warmth and meals shared. Bill approached a rickety table at the center of the room, its surface cluttered with faded papers and a dusty oil lamp. He brushed his fingers over the pages, squinting at the scrawled writing. "Looks like someone was keeping a journal," he mused, flipping through the brittle pages with care. Clara joined him, peering over his shoulder. "What does it say?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "Hard to make out," Bill said, scanning the faded ink. "Seems to be a record of daily life, but there are odd mentions of shadows and voices in the night." He paused, the hairs on his neck prickling. "Listen to this. The spirits are restless, and the creek carries their whispers." "Spirits?" Clara echoed, her brow furrowing. "You reckon the folks who lived here had trouble with the otherworldly?" "Could be," Bill replied, his thoughts racing. "But this is just a piece of the puzzle. We need to know more about who they were." He set the journal aside, his eyes wandering to a wall adorned with photographs, all dusty and faded. One image in particular caught his attention. A group of 5 people, their faces solemn as they stood in front of the very cabin they were in. "Clara, look at this," Bill called, pointing to the photo. "These folks, they look familiar, don't they?" She leaned in closer, squinting at the image. "By golly, they do. That woman there," she said, gesturing to a figure with wild hair and striking features. "She looks like the one from the locket." "Sure does," Bill said, feeling the weight of the discovery settle on his shoulders. "But who are the others, and what happened to them?" He felt a creeping unease settle in his stomach as he considered the implications. Roger suddenly let out a low growl, his ears perked and tail bristled. Bill turned, eyes narrowing as he scanned the room. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his heart thumping louder. The dog moved closer to the window, staring intently into the night. "Something's out there," Clara whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't like the feel of this place, Bill. It's almost as if it's watching us." "Hold on a sec," Bill said, striding toward the window. He peered outside, the moonlight casting long shadows across the ground. At first he saw nothing but the swaying grass and the glimmer of the creek, but then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a flicker of movement. Something dark darted behind a tree, just beyond the cabin's reach. "Did you see that?" he asked Clara, turning to her, his voice tense. "I did," she replied, her face pale. "What do you think it is?" "I don't rightly know, but we ought to find out," Bill said, his curiosity piqued despite the growing dread. "Stay close and keep that lantern steady." He edged toward the door, Roger leading the way as he sniffed the air, his instincts sharpening. As they stepped outside, the cool night air rushed to meet them, invigorating, yet laced with tension. Bill's eyes adjusted to the darkness, searching for the source of the movement. "If there's something out here, we best be ready for it," he muttered, gripping the lantern tighter. The shadows twisted and turned under the pale moonlight, and Roger moved cautiously, nose to the ground, tracking a scent that seemed to linger just beyond their reach. "Come on, boy, lead the way," Bill urged, his voice barely above a whisper. They moved cautiously, glancing at each other, the thrill of the unknown pulling them deeper into the night. The creek babbled softly nearby, its voice mingling with the rustling leaves overhead. Suddenly Roger stopped, his body tense, fixating on a patch of darkness ahead. Bill felt a shiver run down his spine as he followed the dog's gaze. In that moment, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form flickering like a candle's flame. It was the woman from the locket, ethereal and translucent, her sorrowful eyes fixed on them. Clara gasped, stumbling back into Bill, who instinctively reached for her, anchoring her to him. "What do you want?" Bill called, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. "Who are you?" The spectre raised a hand, pointing toward the creek, her mouth moving as though trying to speak, but no words came. Instead, a cold breeze swept through, carrying with it a sound that resembled a soft, haunting wail. "Bill!" Clara breathed, gripping his arm. "We need to go, now!" But Bill was rooted in place, his curiosity wrestling with his fear. "Wait," he whispered, as the apparition began to fade, her figure dissolving into the mist. "We can't leave just yet. She's trying to tell us something." As the last remnants of the spirit vanished into the night, the air grew still, and a sense of foreboding settled over them. Bill and Clara stood in silence, hearts pounding, the weight of their discovery pressing heavily on their shoulders. "Whatever this is, it's far from over," Bill murmured, glancing at the creek where the figure had pointed. "We gotta follow that water. There might be answers waiting downstream." With Roger leading the way, they turned their backs on the cabin, determination flickering in their hearts like the lantern's flame. As they moved forward into the darkness, the mysteries of the past beckoned them closer, and the shadows whispered secrets they were bound to uncover. Bill stepped cautiously along the narrow path that wound its way beside the creek, the water gurgling softly as it danced over rocks smoothed by time. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape that felt both inviting and ominous. Clara walked beside him, her lantern flickering with each step, the light reflecting off the surface of the creek like stars spilling into the water. Roger trotted ahead, nose to the ground, as if he were a tracker on the scent of a long-lost trail. "Easy, boy," Bill called, his voice low. He could sense the dog's alertness, the way Roger's ears twitched at the slightest sound. "What do you smell?" Roger paused, lifting his head and letting out a low growl that echoed softly through the night air. Bill felt a tightening in his chest, the weight of the spectre's presence still fresh in his mind. "Stay sharp, partner," he muttered, following the dog as they approached a bend in the creek. As they rounded the corner, the lantern's glow illuminated a patch of ground that appeared different from the rest. The earth was disturbed, as if something had been dug up and hastily covered again. A sudden chill ran down Bill's spine, and he knelt down, brushing away the dirt with his fingers. "Clara, come take a look at this," he called, his heart racing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice edged with concern, as she stepped closer, lantern held high. "Looks like a grave," he said quietly, revealing a crude wooden marker half buried in the soil. The letters were faded and worn, but Bill could just make out the name. "Eleanor, Eleanor," Clara whispered, her eyes widening as she met Bill's gaze. "Could that be her?" "Could be," Bill replied, squinting at the marker as he contemplated their next move. "This ain't no ordinary grave, though. It's been disturbed maybe recently. That specter's got something to do with it." Just then, Roger began to bark, his voice sharp and urgent, cutting through the stillness of the night. Bill stood up, heart pounding, and turned to see the dog darting toward the water's edge, where the creek widened into a small pool. "Roger, what is it?" Bill called, his pulse quickening. The dog stopped short, his fur bristling as he stood over something half submerged in the water. Bill rushed to catch up, Clara close behind him, lanterns swinging to and fro. As they neared the edge of the pool, Bill's breath caught in his throat. There, glimmering under the water, was a lockbox, its metal surface tarnished but unmistakably intact. "Clara, look at that!" he exclaimed, kneeling beside the water's edge. The lockbox was ornate, etched with swirling patterns and symbols that felt oddly familiar, a jolt of recognition sparking in his mind. "Do you think it's the same one from the storage locker?" Clara asked, her voice a mix of excitement and dread. "Could be," Bill replied, eyeing the box warily. "But I reckon we ought to be careful. Whatever's inside might be tied to all this." He glanced at Roger, who stood vigilantly by the water, eyes fixed on the lockbox as if guarding against unseen threats. "Can you get it out, Bill?" Clara asked, shifting nervously. "What if it's cursed or something?" "Cursed or not, we gotta know," Bill said firmly, "for Eleanor's sake and for our own." He took off his hat, placing it on the ground beside him, and began to reach for the lockbox. The water was icy against his skin as he plunged his hand in, fingers wrapping around the cold metal. He felt the weight of it pull against him, and he grunted as he pulled it free from the grasp of the creek. With a great effort, he heaved the lockbox onto the muddy bank, its surface glinting ominously in the lantern light. "Now, what do you suppose we do with it?" Clara asked, her eyes darting nervously between the box and the darkening woods beyond. "We ought to get it back to the cabin," Bill decided, catching his breath. "We'll need a proper place to open it, and I don't like the look of this night." As they started to head back, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and carrying with it the faint echo of a wailing cry, like a memory of sorrow carried on the breeze. Bill paused, glancing back toward the water where the shadows seemed to deepen, curling around the edges of the creek like fingers reaching out. "Did you hear that?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "I did," Bill replied, unease knotting in his stomach. "It's as if something's trying to warn us." Roger's low growl returned, and Bill felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. "Let's get on with it. We've stirred up enough trouble for one night." He picked up the lockbox, its cold weight a reminder of the mysteries yet to unfold. As they made their way back to the cabin, Bill's thoughts raced with possibilities. What secrets lay hidden within that box? And what had happened to Eleanor and the others? The answers lay just out of reach, waiting to be uncovered. The night pressed around them, filled with the whispers of the past, as they moved deeper into the heart of a mystery that had long been buried beneath the soil. The moon hung low in the sky, a pale guardian watching over the rugged landscape as Bill and Clara trudged back toward the cabin, Roger leading the way with an air of vigilance. The crunch of gravel beneath their boots echoed in the stillness, a stark contrast to the haunting wail that had drifted through the night like a ghostly sigh. Bill's heart raced, the weight of the lockbox heavy in his arms as he pondered the secrets it might hold. "Do you reckon we ought to take a peek at it right away?" Clara asked, glancing sideways at the lockbox, her brow furrowed with worry. The lantern flickered as a gust of wind swept through the trees, casting long shadows that danced against the cabin's weathered walls. "Not just yet," Bill replied, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. "First, we'll get it inside, then we can see what the good Lord has in store for us." Roger paused at the cabin's threshold, ears perked, surveying the woods with a cautious tilt of his head. The dog's instincts were sharper than a rattlesnake's fang, and Bill trusted them more than he trusted his own gut at times. "Easy now, boy," he murmured, scratching Roger behind the ears as they stepped over the threshold, the heavy door creaking in protest. Inside, the cabin smelled of aged wood and the faint trace of cedar smoke lingering from the last fire they'd stoked. Clara moved to set the lantern on the rough-hewn table, its light flickering against the walls as if illuminating old memories that had settled in the corners like dust. Bill placed the lockbox on the table, eyeing it warily. The symbols etched into the metal seemed to shimmer in the lantern's glow, twisting and turning in ways that made his skin prickle. "Let's see what we're working with," he said, his voice low and steady. He felt Clara's gaze bore into him, a mix of hope and apprehension. She had been through enough heartache, and the last thing he wanted was to drag her deeper into a well of darkness. He pulled out a small rusty pick from his saddlebag, the same one he had used many a time to pry stubborn rocks from the earth. With a careful hand, he began to probe at the lock, searching for any sign of weakness. The lock, though old and tarnished, held firm, as if it had a mind of its own, refusing to yield to his efforts. "Maybe we ought to try something different," Clara suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. "I can't shake the feeling that whatever's inside, it ain't meant to be opened lightly." Bill paused, considering her words. "You might be right, but I'll be damned if I let it sit here and collect dust. Eleanor deserves more than that." He glanced toward Roger, who had settled at his feet, tail thumping softly against the floor, a reassuring presence in the tension-laden air. As he resumed his efforts, the lock suddenly clicked, surprising him with its unexpected compliance. Clara jumped back, a gasp escaping her lips. The lid creaked open slowly, revealing a layer of faded velvet that felt strangely out of place in the rugged cabin. Bill hesitated, his heart pounding as he took a breath, his eyes scanning the contents within. Beneath the velvet lay a collection of items, old photographs, yellowed and crinkled with age, a delicate locket that seemed to gleam with a life of its own, and a small, leather-bound journal whose cover bore the initials E.M. "Look at this," he said, lifting the journal gently from the box. The leather felt warm against his fingers, almost as if it had been waiting for someone to reclaim it. He glanced up at Clara, who leaned in closer, her eyes wide with curiosity. "This might be Eleanor's. Do you think she wrote it?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper as she reached out to touch the locket. It swung gently, catching the light and reflecting tiny bursts of gold. "What if it holds answers?" "Let's find out," Bill replied, flipping the journal open to the first page. The handwriting was neat and precise, each letter carefully formed, as if the writer had taken great care to convey their thoughts. As he read, the words painted a vivid picture of Eleanor's life, a life filled with dreams, heartaches, and a longing for something just beyond her grasp. She spoke of a love lost to the wilds, of a family torn apart by tragedy, and of a darkness that seemed to follow her, lurking in the shadows. "Clara," Bill said, his voice steady but filled with wonder, "this ain't just any journal. She was searching for something that had been taken from her." His brow furrowed as he turned the page, revealing sketches of strange symbols, the very same that adorned the lockbox. Just then, Roger's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl, his eyes fixated on the door, as if sensing an encroaching threat. Bill glanced up, feeling a chill creep along his spine. "What is it, boy?" The dog remained vigilant, the air thick with tension as if the cabin itself held its breath. Bill and Clara exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever secrets Eleanor had sought were now tangled with their own, and the night had not yet revealed its final act. "Let's keep looking," Bill suggested, his heart racing as he turned the pages of the journal. "There's more here, I can feel it, and we ain't alone." With every turn of the page, the shadows seemed to lengthen, stretching toward them like fingers of darkness, as the echoes of Eleanor's past intertwined with their present. A storm brewing on the horizon, a reckoning that could change everything they thought they knew. Bill leaned closer to the journal, the flickering light casting dancing shadows across the pages. Each word felt alive, pulling him deeper into Eleanor's world, a world that twisted and turned like the rugged trails of the frontier itself. He could almost hear her voice, laced with both yearning and despair. "Listen to this," he said, his voice barely above a murmur. "She writes about a place called the Hollow Glade, says it's where she felt most alive, but also where she lost everything." His brow furrowed as he turned the page, the inked lines revealing a map sketched with a delicate hand. "Looks like she was trying to find it again." "Where's that at?" Clara asked, leaning in closer, her breath warm against his ear. The scent of pine and earth filled the cabin, mingling with the musty odor of the forgotten belongings. "Not far, I reckon. If this map's right, it's just past the ridge, by the old Miller Ranch." Bill traced a finger along the sketched path, feeling an unexpected pull towards the destination. "Might be worth taking a gander at first light." Roger remained alert, his body tense, muscles coiled like a rattlesnake ready to strike. The dog's sharp gaze darted toward the door again, as if he could sense something lurking just beyond the threshold. Bill's heart raced, half tempted to rise and check the windows, but the journal was too absorbing, each word drawing him in, like the siren's call of a distant train whistle. "Eleanor talks about a curse," Bill continued, flipping through pages filled with ink that seemed to thrum with emotion. "Says it follows her family, like a shadow that won't shake off, a dark presence that takes what's precious." He paused, the weight of her words settling in the air between them. "Could be just tales spun to scare young'uns, but I ain't so sure." Clara shivered, her arms wrapping around herself as if to ward off an unseen chill. "You think that's why the folks around here avoid this place? The storage, the stories?" She glanced at the lockbox, the velvet lining now seeming to pulse with an eerie glow in the lantern light. "Maybe whatever's in here holds the key to it all." "Maybe," Bill replied, though a knot of unease twisted in his stomach. "But whatever it is, it ain't going to be easy to confront. Folks don't shy away from things unless there's a good reason." He glanced at Roger, who was now sniffing at the ground, his snout wrinkling as if he'd caught a whiff of something foul. "What is it, boy?" Roger's growl deepened, a low rumble vibrating through the floorboards. He edged toward the door, a sentinel at the gates of the unknown. Bill felt a shiver creep up his spine, a sense that the shadows were more than mere darkness. They were filled with potential danger, waiting to unfurl. "Let's not dawdle," Bill said, snapping the journal shut with a decisive thud. "We'll head to the hollow glade come dawn. But first, I reckon we ought to make sure we ain't stirring up trouble here." Clara nodded, her expression resolute, but tinged with apprehension. They moved cautiously toward the window, Bill's heart thumping like a war drum as he peered out into the night. The landscape was shrouded in darkness, the moon casting a silvery glow over the hills. The familiar sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves filled the air, yet beneath that something felt off, like the stillness before a storm. "Can't see much out there," he muttered, stepping back from the window. "But Roger's got a nose for trouble. We should light the fire and keep our eyes peeled. If there's something out there, we'll be ready." Clara set to gathering kindling while Bill tended to the lantern, feeling the weight of both the journal and the lockbox heavy in his mind. The warmth of the fire flickered to life, casting golden light that danced against the walls, momentarily dispelling the shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. As they settled into the glow, Bill glanced at Roger, who lay at the edge of the firelight, his ears twitching as if he were deciphering the night's silent messages. "What you reckon, boy? You think Eleanor's spirit is still lingering around here?" Roger lifted his head, ears perked, and let out a soft whine, his eyes glimmering with an intelligence that seemed far beyond a simple dog. Bill felt a jolt of understanding, as if Roger were trying to warn him of something deeper, a connection that transcended their usual companionship. "Maybe we ought to leave the lockbox shut till we're ready," Clara said, her voice breaking through his reverie. "Whatever's inside, it might be better left alone until we know what we're dealing with." Bill nodded, but a part of him was drawn to the mystery like a moth to flame. "You may be right, but there's something in me that wants to know. Wants to understand why Eleanor's past is entwined with ours." The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing into the night, and as they sat in the warm cocoon of light, the shadows outside seemed to stretch and sway, wrapping around the cabin like an unseen hand. With the promise of dawn looming on the horizon, the tension settled into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft crackling of the flames and Roger's occasional growl, a warning that perhaps the darkness was not as empty as it appeared. The fire crackled softly, sending tendrils of warmth into the cool air, but despite its comforting glow, a chill settled in the pit of Bill's stomach. Outside, the night held a somber promise, like a coiled rattler waiting to strike. The stories Clara had shared, along with Eleanor's journal, hung in the air like ghosts of the past. Bill rose from his seat, glancing at Clara. "I reckon we ought to check around the cabin, make sure we ain't left any loose ends untied. If there's a presence lurking about, I'd like to know where it's at before the sun comes up." Clara nodded, her face pale but resolute. "You're right, and if there's something amiss, we best not be caught unaware." "Achi." She set the journal aside and followed him to the door, Roger trailing closely behind, his ears perked and nose to the ground, the embodiment of vigilance. Bill stepped outside into the cool night, the world around him stretching into an endless sea of darkness. The moon hung high, a watchful eye, casting long shadows over the landscape. He squinted, trying to discern anything unusual in the stillness, but the familiar sights of sagebrush and distant hills felt different, like a canvas painted over with an unsettling hue. "Stay close, Roger," he said, feeling the dog's presence beside him, a silent reassurance against the night. As he walked around the cabin, he brushed his hand against the rough-hewn logs, tracing the grooves that had weathered many a storm. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, but beneath it there was something else, a trace of decay, as if the very ground was holding its breath. Clara followed him to the back of the cabin, where a crumbling stone well sat half hidden by wild grass. Bill knelt beside it, peering down into the dark abyss. "Might be worth checking this old thing," he mused. "Could be some old remnants down there, or even a way to uncover what happened here years ago." Clara knelt beside him, her brow furrowed. "Be careful, Bill. We don't know what might be lurking down there." "Don't fret none. I'll just toss a rock to see how deep it goes." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the well, the sound echoing down into the void, swallowed by the darkness. After a moment they heard the faintest of splashes. "That's deeper than I expected," Clara said, leaning closer to the edge. Do you think—" Before she could finish, Roger let out a low growl, his body tense and alert. Bill felt the hairs on his neck stand on end as he glanced over his shoulder, scanning the dark perimeter. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his heart quickening. Roger's gaze was fixed on the tree line, his growl deepening, vibrating like a distant thunder. "Something's out there," Clara whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Bill straightened, the urgency in Roger's posture stirring a primal instinct within him. "Let's get back to the cabin," he commanded, and as they hurriedly made their way inside, he could feel the atmosphere shift, as if unseen eyes were watching their every move. Once safely inside, Bill slammed the door shut and locked it tight, the sound echoing in the silence. He turned to Clara, who was peering out of the window, her hands pressed against the cool glass. "I can't see anything, but I can feel it, like the air's been thickened by something not quite right." Bill moved to her side, glancing out into the shadows. "Maybe it's just a coyote or a deer, but Roger's never been one to growl unless he knows something is up." He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "Let's light that lantern and keep watch. I'll check the lockbox again." Clara nodded, her eyes wide with apprehension. "Just be careful, Bill. Whatever's in there, it may not be as harmless as it looks." Bill approached the lockbox, the velvet lining still shimmering in the flickering lantern light. He felt a strange pull toward it, as if it were a living thing beckoning him closer. He hesitated, recalling Eleanor's words about the curse that had haunted her family. "Here goes nothing," he muttered under his breath as he knelt before the box. With a careful flick of the latch, it opened with a soft creak, revealing a collection of old letters, a tarnished locket, and a small, intricately carved wooden figure that looked like a woman with flowing hair and a sorrowful expression. "What in tarnation?" Bill whispered, picking up the wooden figure. The craftsmanship was exquisite, yet the eyes seemed to follow him, a haunting gaze that sent a shiver racing down his spine. He turned it over in his hand, revealing faint etchings on the bottom. "Clara, come look at this," he called, his voice laced with urgency. She stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. "What do you reckon it is? Looks like a likeness of Eleanor, but why in the world would someone carve her like this?" As Clara studied the figure, Roger's growl returned, a low rumble that seemed to resonate with the unease in the air. Bill's grip tightened on the carving, a sense of dread settling in his gut. "Whatever this is, it might be part of the puzzle," he said, lowering his voice as if fearing the walls might overhear. "But I can't help but wonder, is this a tribute, or is it something more sinister, something that ties Eleanor's fate to that of her kin?" Clara's expression darkened. "We need to find out what this means, Bill. The curse, the stories, and they're all connected somehow." Bill nodded, setting the wooden figure down carefully, as if it might shatter under the weight of their discoveries. "We'll head to the hollow glade at first light. If there's a chance we can unravel this mystery, we best be ready for whatever waits for us there." Roger shifted beside them, his low growl morphing into an eager whine, as if he understood the stakes at hand. The dog's loyalty and intuition felt like a lifeline amidst the growing shadows, and as the lantern flickered against the walls, the air thickened with anticipation. "Come morning, we'll confront whatever lies ahead," Bill declared, steeling his resolve. "And we'll do it together." The fire crackled, a fierce guardian against the encroaching dark, and with that they settled in for a long night, the weight of the unknown pressing down upon them like a storm about to break. As dawn painted the horizon in soft hues of orange and lavender, Bill rose from his restless slumber, feeling the weight of the night's fears still heavy upon his chest. The lantern flickered in its corner, casting elongated shadows that danced across the cabin walls like memories from the past. Roger lay curled at the foot of the bed, his ears perked and nostrils flaring, ever vigilant. Bill stretched his arms, feeling the tautness in his muscles, a reminder that every day on the frontier demanded both resilience and readiness. He glanced toward Clara, who remained asleep, her brow furrowed, as if lost in a dream she could not escape. He didn't have the heart to wake her just yet. The day ahead promised enough trouble without adding nightmares to the mix. After pulling on his boots and hat, he stepped outside, the crisp morning air filling his lungs like fresh water from a spring. The world around him was still waking, the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds creating a symphony of the wild. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, the wooden figure from the lockbox weighing heavily on his mind. The questions swirled like dust in the wind. Who carved it? Why did it seem to hold Eleanor's essence? And what lay waiting for them at Hollow Glade? He made his way to the small well behind the cabin, drawing up a bucket of water and splashing his face to shake off the remnants of sleep. As he turned back toward the cabin, Roger darted past him, a blur of fur and excitement, stopping just short of the tree line. His ears stood straight, and his body quivered with a mix of anticipation and caution. "Easy there, boy," Bill called, his voice low and steady. "What's got your tail in a twist?" Roger's growl returned, a low rumble that vibrated through the morning stillness. Bill approached cautiously, his boots crunching on the frost-kissed grass. He squinted into the shadows of the trees, his heart quickening as he felt the familiar prickle of unease. "Stay close, partner," he instructed, pulling his rifle from its resting place by the door. With Roger at his side, he ventured toward the thicket, each step deliberate. The world felt different today, as if the very air had shifted in anticipation of something unspoken. He spotted a disturbance in the underbrush, a patch of earth turned up as if something had clawed its way to the surface. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, kneeling down to inspect the ground. The tracks were fresh, resembling a large animal's, but something about them felt wrong. The claws were too elongated, the paw prints too deep. "What kind of critter are you?" Roger sniffed the ground, his low growl intensifying as he circled the area. Bill followed the trail, the combination of curiosity and caution guiding him deeper into the woods. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches reaching out like fingers, as if warning him to turn back. But he pressed on, compelled by the allure of the unknown. After a few moments, he discovered a small clearing, the sunlight breaking through the canopy like a spotlight on an empty stage. In the center lay a weathered stone, etched with symbols that resembled the carvings on the wooden figure. His heart raced as he approached, every instinct warning him to tread lightly. "What in the name of all that's holy?" Bill whispered, kneeling beside the stone. The etchings felt familiar, but he couldn't quite place them. He traced the lines with his fingers, feeling an energy pulsing beneath his touch, as if the stone were alive, with a story waiting to be told. "Roger," he called softly, "come here, boy." The dog obediently padded over, his nose sniffing at the ground around the stone, then back to Bill, eyes wide and alert. "What do you make of this?" Bill asked, though he knew full well that Roger could only offer his loyal presence, not answers. As the sun climbed higher, the warmth of the day began to melt away the chill of the morning. Bill rose to his feet, resolved to return to the cabin and share his findings with Clara. They needed to piece this puzzle together, and he felt a growing sense of urgency to do so. Just then, Roger perked up, his ears twitching as he looked past Bill, toward the tree line. A moment later, a figure emerged, a gaunt man with sunken cheeks and weary eyes, dressed in tattered clothing that looked as if it had seen better days. His presence sent a wave of foreboding through Bill's chest. "Who are you?" Bill called out, tightening his grip on his rifle. "State your business." The man raised his hand slowly, revealing a set of dirt-stained palms. "No harm, friend," he croaked, his voice rough like gravel. "I'm just looking for some answers, and I reckon you might have what I need." "Answers?" Bill narrowed his eyes, uncertainty curling in his gut. "You know about the lockbox, don't you?" The stranger's eyes flickered with recognition, and he nodded slowly. "I knew Eleanor. I knew the curse that befell her kin. You found the box, didn't you?" Bill's heart raced. "What do you know about it?" "It holds more than just trinkets, son," the man replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's a key. A key to the past and the dangers that haunt this land. The figure you found, it ain't just a piece of wood. It's a warning. Bill felt the hairs on the back of his neck bristle. A warning about what? The man glanced over his shoulder, as if the very trees might be listening. About the spirit that wanders these woods. It seeks revenge, and it won't rest until it claims what's rightfully its own. Bill exchanged a wary look with Roger, who stood beside him, still alert and ready. "And how do you know all this?" "I've seen things," the man said, his gaze distant. "Things that would chill a man's bones. You and your girl best be careful. The past is not as buried as it seems." With that, the stranger turned and vanished back into the shadows of the trees, leaving Bill standing alone with more questions than answers. The air around him seemed to hum with tension, the weight of the man's warning pressing down on his shoulders like a heavy shroud. "Let's get back to Clara," Bill muttered, his voice steadier than he felt. "We've got work to do." He turned, Roger at his heels, both of them keenly aware that the journey ahead would not be without its perils. As they made their way back toward the cabin, the clearing behind them seemed to whisper secrets, the wind carrying tales of a past that refused to be forgotten. As Bill made his way through the dense underbrush, the sun filtered through the branches above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. He could feel the heat rising, but the chill of the stranger's words lingered in the air like a heavy fog. Roger, ever vigilant, trotted ahead, nose to the ground, occasionally glancing back to make sure his master was close behind. They navigated the winding path with caution, each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs echoing in the stillness. The woods, with their towering pines and whispering aspens, felt like a world unto themselves, each tree a witness to the tales that had unfolded over the years. Bill couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone, that unseen eyes were watching from the shadows. "Keep sharp, boy," he murmured to Roger, who paused to sniff at a fallen branch, his ears perked high. "I reckon we got ourselves a mystery to solve, and I don't want any surprises creeping up on us." As they approached the cabin, the familiar outline of the structure against the sky was a welcome sight. It stood resolute, a bastion of safety amid the wildness that surrounded it. Bill quickened his pace, thoughts racing. Clara would want to hear about the stranger, the stone, and the lockbox. They needed to put their heads together to make sense of the warning. Inside, Clara was seated at the rough-hewn table, her hands busy with a quilt she'd been stitching together, the soft cadence of her needle pulling thread through fabric a comfort to Bill's ears. The scent of wood smoke mingled with the earthy aroma of the cabin, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. "Bill, you're back!" she exclaimed, looking up with a smile that instantly lit up the dim space. But her expression shifted when she saw the serious look on his face. "What's wrong?" "Sit tight, Clara," he said, easing into a chair across from her. "You ain't gonna believe what I just found out." As he recounted the encounter with the gaunt stranger, Clara's brow furrowed deeper with each word. "A curse? A spirit?" she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "What do you think it means?" "I reckon we need to find out more about Eleanor and that lockbox," Bill replied, rubbing the back of his neck as he felt the weight of uncertainty settle upon him. "That man spoke of a past that could come back to haunt us. We need to take this seriously." Clara nodded, her fingers pausing in their work. "If it's a key, then maybe it leads to more than just a curse. It could be a way to help those who were wronged. We should start digging through some old records. There's a library in town that might have something." "Good idea," Bill said, glancing out the window, where the trees stood tall against the horizon, their branches swaying gently in the wind. "But we need to be careful. Something tells me we ain't the only ones searching for answers." Roger, who had been lying at Bill's feet, suddenly lifted his head, ears twitching as he directed his gaze toward the door. His growl rumbled low in his throat, a sound that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, standing up and moving toward the door. Clara followed closely, her heart racing. The cabin felt suddenly too small, too confined. The door creaked as Bill opened it, the daylight pouring in, illuminating the wooden floor. Outside, the world was still, but Roger was tense, every muscle in his body coiled tight. The dog darted forward, nose to the ground, following an unseen scent. "What do you smell?" Bill asked, stepping outside and scanning the area. The vastness of the frontier stretched before him, but something felt off. The air was charged, electric, as if a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. Roger continued to sniff at the ground, then paused, barking sharply before darting off toward the edge of the clearing. Bill's heart raced as he hurried after him, Clara right on his heels. "Roger, wait!" Bill called, his voice echoing in the open air. They reached a thicket where the underbrush was thick and tangled. Roger was standing beside a gnarled tree, barking at something half hidden beneath the roots. Bill knelt down, pushing aside the branches, and gasped at what lay before him. It was another lockbox, smaller than the first, but ornate in its own right, with intricate carvings similar to those on the figure and the stone. It seemed to hum with an energy that resonated with the very earth beneath it. "Clara, look at this," Bill said, his voice filled with awe. "What do you reckon it is?" "I don't know," she replied, kneeling beside him. "But it's beautiful, and it feels alive, doesn't it?" As they examined the box, Roger growled again, but this time with a different tone, one of unease rather than excitement. He stood rigid, facing the tree line, as if sensing something lurking in the shadows. "Let's open it," Clara suggested, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. Bill hesitated, glancing at the woods where the stranger had appeared. "I don't know, Clara. It could be dangerous. We don't know what's inside or what it might do." But Clara's determination was unwavering. "We can't turn back now. Whatever's going on, we need to face it together." With a deep breath, Bill nodded. "All right, but let's be smart about it. We'll do this together." As he reached for the latch, Roger's growl escalated into a fierce bark, and the hairs on the back of Bill's neck stood on end. Something was coming, something that would shake the very ground they stood on. The air grew thick, heavy with tension, as they prepared to confront whatever lay within the box, unaware that the true mystery was only just beginning to unfurl like the branches of the trees above them. Bill's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the latch of the lockbox. It gleamed dully in the filtered sunlight, and with a firm press he felt the mechanism give way. The moment he opened it, a waft of earthy scent rushed out, mingling with the crisp air of the thicket. He hesitated, his heart thudding against his ribs, as he glanced at Clara, whose eyes sparkled with a blend of fear and excitement. "Ready?" he asked, his voice a gravelly whisper. Clara nodded, leaning closer, her breath barely stirring the stillness around them. "On three," she said, her voice steady, despite the tension crackling between them. "1, 2, 3. They lifted the lid together, and it creaked open, like an old door revealing secrets long kept. Inside, nestled within a bed of faded velvet, lay a collection of objects that glinted like stars fallen from the night sky. A silver locket, tarnished with age, a small crystal vial filled with a dark liquid, and a worn leather journal, the pages yellowed and curling at the edges. "By the good Lord," Bill breathed, reaching for the journal first. He flipped it open, revealing hurriedly scrawled notes and sketches that made his head spin. "It's someone's diary," he murmured, scanning the spidery handwriting. "Looks like Eleanor's. It mentions strange happenings in town, something about restless spirits and wronged souls." Clara leaned in, her brow furrowed in concentration as she read over his shoulder. "This could be it, Bill. We might find out why she was cursed or what happened to her." "Yeah, but it's just as likely to lead us into trouble," he replied, glancing back at Roger, who was now sniffing the air intently, his ears perked as if trying to catch the slightest sound. "Whatever that spirit was warning us about, I reckon it's more than just tales told round a campfire," Bill added, flipping through the pages carefully. The handwriting grew frantic as the entries progressed, detailing encounters with figures cloaked in shadows, whispers of betrayal and vengeance. Each word felt heavier than the last, resonating with a sense of impending doom. Roger suddenly turned, his body stiffening, and emitted a low growl that resonated through the stillness. Bill's heart dropped as he looked to where the dog was focused, toward the tree line, the very place that had birthed their strange encounter with the gaunt stranger. "Something's out there," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the words alone might summon whatever it was, lurking just beyond their sight. "Stay close, Clara," Bill ordered, closing the journal and setting it back in the box with a thud that echoed like a gunshot. He stood, scanning the shadows creeping between the trees, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Just then, Roger darted forward a few steps, barking sharply, his stance protective. Bill followed instinctively, his instincts kicking in. "What is it, boy?" he called, his voice steadying in the face of mounting dread, but Roger only whined, pacing, his eyes darting back and forth, nose to the ground, as if trying to track the scent of something that had passed through moments before. Bill's gut twisted with unease. They were not alone. "I think we should head back to the cabin," Clara suggested, her voice tight, the thrill of discovery now mingling with trepidation. "No," Bill replied firmly, though he could feel the tension in his own muscles. "We can't leave this behind. There might be more clues here." He turned back to the lockbox, rummaging through the contents once more, his hands moving with purpose. "We can at least take the diary and the locket. They might hold the key to this mystery." The locket caught Clara's eye. "What's in it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the air. Bill opened the locket, revealing a faded portrait of a woman with dark, piercing eyes that seemed to stare right through them. "That's Eleanor," he murmured, recognizing the face from the sketches in the diary. "But who's the man beside her?" Clara leaned in closer, and as she did, a chill gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves above them, sending a shiver down Bill's spine. "We ought to get out of here," he insisted, shoving the locket into his pocket. "Whatever's watching us, it doesn't like us poking around." As if to punctuate his words, a low moan echoed from the depths of the trees, a sound like the wind mourning its losses. Roger's growl intensified, and he took a step back, eyes fixed on the darkening shadows. "Bill, please," Clara urged, her voice trembling. "Let's go back now. We can study the diary in safety." He nodded, the weight of her fear settling over him like a heavy blanket. "All right, let's get moving." He turned and started toward the cabin, Clara right behind him, with Roger bringing up the rear, always alert, always watchful. As they made their way back, the thicket seemed to come alive with whispers, the rustling leaves speaking in tongues of old. Bill could feel the specter of unease hovering just at the edge of his consciousness, a warning to tread carefully. The world around them felt charged, alive with secrets, and as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced like phantoms on the ground, Bill knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would uncover the truths buried deep within the heart of their frontier. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in a palette of burnt orange and deep violet, as Bill, Clara, and Roger hurried toward the cabin. The soft crunch of twigs underfoot seemed amplified in the encroaching twilight, each sound a reminder of the shadows that lingered just beyond their sight. Bill kept his senses sharp, the hairs on the back of his neck prickling as he recalled the moans and whispers that had followed them like a haunting melody. Once inside the cabin, Clara lit a lantern, the warm glow pushing back the encroaching darkness. Bill spread out the contents of the lockbox on the table, each item holding the weight of their discoveries. "All right, let's make sense of this," he said, his voice steadying as he sat across from Clara, who was already flipping through the diary. Roger, ever vigilant, paced the perimeter, occasionally glancing back to ensure his companions were safe. Bill watched his loyal dog, admiration swelling in his chest. "You've got a good nose, boy," he muttered, thinking of how Roger had sensed the danger before they even set foot in the thicket. Clara's eyes widened as she read aloud from the diary. Eleanor wrote about the shadows that followed her, the strange happenings around town. She mentions a man, James, who was jealous of her, someone who wanted her gone. The words tumbled out, thick with urgency. "James?" Bill recalled the name from the locket. Could he be the one in the portrait? Clara nodded, her expression grave. It seems he was involved in some shady dealings. Eleanor claimed he wanted her to disappear so he could claim her fortune and her land. But that's not all. She wrote about a curse he supposedly placed on her, an old wives' tale meant to frighten her into submission. Bill's brow furrowed as he connected the dots. So it wasn't a curse at all, but a ruse to scare her. The shadows and the moans, they were just tricks meant to keep her from uncovering his plans. Just then, Roger barked sharply, his focus drawn to the window. Bill and Clara exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. I reckon we should see what he's up to, Bill suggested, grabbing his hat and glancing at Roger. You ready, boy? With a determined wag of his tail, Roger bounded to the door, ready for action. They slipped outside, the night wrapping around them like a shroud as they crept toward the edge of the tree line. The moon shone brightly overhead, illuminating the path that led to the old barn where James had been seen lurking. As they approached, Bill's heart raced. He signaled for Clara to stay low, and they hid behind a stack of hay bales. Peering through a gap, they saw a flickering light and the shadowy figure of James moving about. Bill leaned in, whispering, "Let's see what he's got planned." Through the dim light, they could see James rifling through papers, stacks of them, all marked with numbers and names. "He's been scheming," Clara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Looks like he's trying to erase his tracks," Bill replied, squinting to get a better look. Suddenly Roger's growl intensified, and the dog stood, poised to leap forward. "Easy, boy," Bill whispered, but the canine had already caught the scent of something. With a quick dart, Roger bolted toward the barn. "No!" Bill shouted, springing after him. The moment they burst into the barn, James turned, eyes wide as a deer caught in the headlights. "What the hell are you doing here?" He spat, but the panic in his voice betrayed his bravado. "Just trying to put the pieces together, James," Bill replied, his voice steady. "We know what you've been up to. Trying to scare Eleanor into submission so you could take her land." James laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the barn. "You don't know what you're talking about. That woman was a fool, and she deserved what happened to her." The words struck Bill like a bullet, and in that moment he realized the depth of James's treachery. "She never was cursed. It was all a trick you played, to frighten her into leaving." With a snarl, James grabbed a pitchfork, brandishing it as if it were a weapon of old. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing but a washed-up cowboy and a mutt." But Roger, unyielding and fierce, lunged at James, barking furiously. The distraction was enough for Bill to close the distance, tackling the man and sending the pitchfork clattering across the barn floor. "Clara, get help!" Bill shouted as he wrestled with James, who was surprisingly strong, fueled by desperation. Clara dashed outside, her footsteps echoing as she raced for town. In the struggle, Bill caught a glimpse of a nearby crate, one that Roger had sniffed at earlier. It bore the name of a local bank, a subtle clue that ignited a spark of realization. "You were planning to skip town, weren't you?" he panted, grappling with James. "With all that stolen money you've got hidden in here." The fight raged on, but the arrival of Clara with the sheriff and a few townsfolk turned the tide. They burst through the door, guns drawn, just as Bill managed to subdue James. The sight of the law sent the would-be thief into a panic. He struggled against Bill's grip, but found himself swiftly overpowered. As the sheriff cuffed James, Clara looked at Bill, her eyes wide with relief. "You did it, Bill! You figured it all out!" Roger barked happily, circling around them, proud of his part in the rescue. Bill, dusting himself off, smiled down at his loyal companion. "It wasn't just me. We did this together." With James in custody, the townsfolk turned their attention to the diary and the lockbox. "Looks like Eleanor was never cursed after all," the sheriff said, examining the contents. "Just a victim of jealousy and greed." Bill nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "She deserves justice, and we're going to make sure she gets it." As the moon hung high above, casting a silver light on the barn, the trio stood together, a cowboy, a girl, and a dog, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Justice had been served, and the shadows that haunted them were lifted, revealing a brighter path. Now, who knows what other mysteries are waiting for us out there, Bill said, a grin spreading across his face. Let's saddle up and ride. With Roger barking in agreement, they stepped into the cool night, their hearts light with hope and adventure. The frontier awaited, filled with tales yet to be told.